Hello, my name is Jeremy, and on this channel I talk about color and light. And today I want to talk about a big subject. So I'm not going to do any live painting in this one because there's going to be a lot of information, but I hope it's really useful. So I often have people come to me and say, what do companies want? There's a lot of people that want to break into the industry as a professional artist, and there's one thing that I see that companies want from artists the most that's the hardest to train. It's not technical knowledge, it's not software knowledge. It's the ability to make things that are beautiful and just knowing intuitively how to do this. So I want to today talk about what is beauty. It seems like such an arbitrary term. It seems like something mystical and magical that you have or you don't have. So I want to talk today specifically about this. According to culture from marketing and advertising, beauty in the human face is symmetry. Following the lines that have a prescribed pattern of this is where the eyes should be, this is where the nose should be, this is where the mouth should be, and that is beautiful. The most generic, standard face possible is what is beautiful, which I think is kind of funny because when we look at nature, it's almost the exact opposite. We look for places that's not the most common just field out somewhere. It's these places that have scars on the environment due to glaciers pushing through, making big canyons and explosions from ancient volcanoes. This is Crater Lake, that has this giant scar, but that's so beautiful. We can look at all kinds of different unique places in the world, and it's the exact opposite of what we look for in the beauty of people. So what is beauty? Let's really talk about this, because this is a subject that I think not a lot of people talk about. We leave it in that mystical place of like, it's just some magical thing. We know what beauty is, and you only know it when you see it. Well, I disagree. I think that there are a series of tools that we can use to help us discern what beautiful is. So I want to look through a few images here and just see, what do you think? Which is more beautiful? The image on the left or the image on the right? They're the same place. Actually, this is only 15 minutes difference between these pictures when they were taken. How about these two? Of these photos, it's the same dog, just the photos are slightly different. The lighting is different, the composition is different. Which do you think is better? Which is more beautiful? How about this one? This one's my favorite example of being able to go, no, there are scientific things that we can look at, as tools with light to be able to make an image beautiful. Which is more beautiful? Is it this image on the left or this image on the right? It is the same place taking just one day different in Iceland. This is a place called Geyser, where all other geysers in the world are named from. That's the actual name of this place, is Geyser. So there is something about this image that's better than this image. This one's hard to understand because the lighting is flat and there's no contrast, and I can't really see it. If I blur my eyes, this all turns white. If I blur my eyes on this one, I still see the shape of the image. So I once heard somebody say, actually many times I've heard somebody say that something, there's somebody who's really beautiful, that they're easy on the eyes. And so the more I thought about it, it's like, this is a fantastic way to say whether something is beautiful. Is it easy to understand? Between these two, this one's easy to understand, this one's not. And so thus, this one becomes more beautiful because I can instantly understand what it is. It's easy on my eyes. I can see its shape, I can see its form, I can understand what it is. I can, understand the light. The light looks believable. It's really easy on the eyes. If you go to museums, you go into a gallery and you can sit down and look at an image for 10, 20, 30 minutes if you want. You can, a couple of hours to really study it and see the beauty. But we live in a digital age. We watch YouTube videos, we watch movies, we play games. This is the art of our time. This is what we absorb. And so the average shot length of a movie is between 4 and 8 seconds that you get to see that image. So you better understand it pretty fast. If you only have 4 seconds to be able to see it, it's really, really important. Okay, so I'm going to give you 7 lighting factors of beauty. So these are 7 things that I think we can use to define what is beautiful and what is not. Shape, form, depth, separation, contrast, palette, and focal point. All right, first one, shapes. Can you understand what the object is? So here's some examples from cinema of shapes that are very, very easy on the eyes. Roger Deakins, cinematographer, probably the most famous cinematographer, is known for making very simple lighting setups that are very, very easy on the eyes. They're very graphic and easy to understand. I can tell that that's a human being walking through a field with a fire behind him. There you go. It's very easy to understand, very easy on the eyes. This is from Blade Runner, another shot. The fog and everything is layered in such a way. If I only have 2 seconds to see this or 4 seconds to see this, I know exactly what I'm looking at. Here's another shot from Blade Runner. Very, very, very simple. In fact, Blade Runner 2049 is an epic example of beautiful cinematography that's very easy on the eyes. Almost all of the shots are they're done as simple as possible so that you can understand the shape and the form and what you're looking at, and you don't need anything else. Here's another shot from The Revenant. I can understand it really easy. So shape. You need to be able to understand what you are looking at. Form. Form, another word to say form is shaping. And this is not just what it is, but the way the light wraps around an object, the three-dimensionality of this object. Let's look at an example in 3D of different ways to light a face. If you light like a flash bulb on a camera, if there was a light on top of this camera facing right at me, this is what it would look like. And I don't like using flash on the camera because it makes flat lighting. So this term flat just means that everything's kind of even and flood lit. So I don't prefer to do a light directly from the front. So what if we put that light kind of looking down? Okay, now I can start to see some shaping. I can start to see some of the form and the curves because we understand light. It's wrapping over the top and around the edges. This isn't very appealing though because I can't see the eyes. So what if we were to move it a little bit forward, where you can see the eyes? Okay, now I'm starting to see some good shaping on this. But we're getting these weird shadows. It gives them kind of this weird mustachy look, and there's still high contrast in here. So let's make the shadows softer, and now it starts to look even better. It gives this an even better shape. So we're looking at a two-dimensional image, but our brains are seeing a three-dimensional form out of this. This is why we call it form. You're seeing the curves and understanding the three-dimensionality of this. If we were to take this light and kind of shift it off to the side at like a 45-degree angle, now we have a light side of the face and a dark side of the face. This is what would be considered classic Rembrandt lighting. You might have heard that in art classes before. And this is a really standard way to give good form because you will have a light side and a dark side. Rembrandt meaning there's this little triangle of light that comes onto the opposite cheek on the shadow side. Again, it tells you how much depth there is on this surface. If we were to, again, soften this light, it wraps it even more, and I can see both eyeballs. I can see the size of the nose and the lips and everything. It's very appealing. Something that you probably heard of as well is three-point lighting. 3 points meaning a key light, a light from the side. I have a key light on my face right now, a big soft light source that's over here, and it's providing the majority of the light onto my face. And then I have other lights that will help separate me from the background. So another source of three-point lighting is, besides a key light, are rim lights and then some fill lights. So those are your three lights: your key, your rim, your fill, and then you can see the whole thing. So rim lights are lights that are from behind. I have rim lights here in this room that I've set up specifically to shape my face for this talk. So I have a rim light from this side, a rim light from that side, and it gives me more shape and form onto my face. Then if I were to add those back together, now you can see I'm really understanding this now. I'm really seeing the form of this. If I were to take this and add some extra colors into there, I can get a lot more, interest in here. Okay, so let's look at some images from movies. Look at the lights are positioned in such a way that they wrap around the face, and I can see one side, the other side. I can tell the shape of his face really easy. Here's another one that, has several different lights of different colors that even help tell my mind. It makes it very easy on my eyes to go, okay, there's blue light coming from back here, and then there's a soft fill from the front, and then there's a warm light from the side. I can understand his face. I can see this. I can understand it. It's very easy. Here's another from that same film. It has so much beautiful cinematography in this film. Using the TV as a rim light onto his face. And there might, actually, I can tell, they supplemented this. This light is not actually hitting his face. If you look back here, okay, little trick, lighting trick for you, and this is something that I do with movies all the time, is I look for reflective surfaces. So there is a glass, whatever this is, on top of his television, and you can see a highlight, specular highlight up here of a blue light source. And I'm sure that there is a light off screen that is lighting this room and the table and providing this rim light to give shaping to his form that's more than just the TV. Which is like, for me in this room, that lamp back there is not actually lighting my face. If I turn off this light, all the other lights, there's no light from that lamp. So I supplemented my light with an extra light on the side to make it look like that lamp is lighting me. I'd like to talk about an idea too, some terms. I mean, on this channel, I want to get you familiar with terms that we use in the industry all the time. Like if you're on the job as a lighting artist, we'll talk about things like core shadow. This image has a really great core shadow, and the core shadow is the dark line in between two different lights. So you have light coming onto the face. There is a dark part on my face in this image that I can see, you know, where that's the core in between two different light sources. This one has a very nice core. There's a light from the right and there's a light from the left, and then this dark spot in between that really helps me understand the image. You can apply this to soft situations as well. Like this image here from Dune, it's very, very soft lighting, but there's still shaping because there's a light from the side, there's a light from this side, and I can see the way the light wraps around. It is not completely flat. It is closer to flat. It is considered, this is high key lighting, which means there's a lot of light. The key is really strong. The key light, the main light source is just very soft and big, and everything, you can see a lot. We can look at this and go, this lamp is lighting her face. Well, I guarantee you that this lamp is not doing what we're seeing on the face. This is what the lighting setup looked like in the room, and this is what the final shot looked like down here. So there's a lamp, but the lamp's not doing much onto her face, a little bit of rim, but they want to wrap that light around her face. So you look at her face first. She's the most important thing in this scene, so we need to look at her and we need to understand the shaping. So they created this cove light where they're bouncing lights off of large pieces of cloth in the room. You know, this one's brighter, this one's a little bit less, this one's a little bit less, that lets the light kind of wrap around. These are the ideas of lighting that make something better than photorealism. This makes fantastic believability. This feels very believable, but it's not just a lamp in a room and you shoot it. They're editing the light, they're shaping the light, they're manipulating it, pushing and pulling it. It's quite fascinating. So the first one was shapes, second one was form, the third one is depth. So what we want in an image, again, we're looking at a two-dimensional image and we want to be able to understand the world. It needs to be as easy on the eyes as possible. So I want to see depth. This image from the TV show Arcane is amazing. There's geometry that supports this idea of perspective. All the perspective lines are going off into space, and then the light, the fog, the atmospheric perspective here. The fog in the air actually gives you perspective that gives you depth. And it makes this very easy to read, to go, I know where I need to look because whoosh, everything goes to right there where those characters are. Here's another example from Arcane of just really good depth. You know, the fog and the lights in the background really, you know, I can tell that this, because it's darker in the foreground, and then, you know, different levels of black as you go back, you know, the closest to camera has the least amount of atmosphere. So the darkest darks will be in the foreground. And then as the atmosphere goes, the levels of the blackest blacks disappear and turn more towards the color of the lights themselves. Atmospheric perspective is an amazing thing. In fact, once you start learning these things, you'll realize how heavy of a tool this is to see the light. And it's very interesting to me because it's like, it's almost ridiculous. You know, like these tools are used so much and yet people are unconscious to it. We just go, oh, it's just so beautiful. And like, wow, yeah, because they always put fog into these scenes. So even in a scene like this that's a lot closer, there's, you know, the dark in the foreground, and then there's a little bit of fog here that helps separate that character from the background and tells my eye, you know, the contrast is right here. Look at this character. And then there's good depth because of all of these lighting tools. So the atmosphere in the background just says, don't pay attention to me. I'm really far away. I can understand all of this information because of the use of light. At first glance, this image is like, well, all the light's coming from these big windows back here. And, you know, there's soft light in the area. Again, it's filled with atmosphere as if a whole bunch of people are, you know, smoking in the room or something. You know, what's going on in here? I guess it's all the candles. The candles will make the slight smoke into the air. But if you really look at it, if you slow down and look at it, this light source isn't coming from the window. It's coming from something right behind this pillar. They have a light source, a cinema light that is put up on a C-stand, shining into the scene that is giving this depth and giving the shape onto the face. I can see the form of the main character here, the contrast. I can really see it very clearly. You know, even in simple scenes, you know, the level of just a little bit of haze in the air lets me see depth. I can see these hills far away. I understand the world instantly from this one image. The characters also really kind of like pop off the background because the contrast here, they're darker than the background because of that depth. I can really see them. Which brings me to my next point, which is separation. Separation is the idea of, can you take these shapes and these forms and pull them apart so I can understand them as easy as possible? It's almost ridiculous when you think about the amount of haze that is put into the air. Every set that I've been on, fill it with some level of smoke, and what that does, or haze, really, it's just little particulates in the air because it makes for good separation. I can see this character shape separate from this character shape, separate from this character shape. The light, that one light source that was put into this room really helps me understand who they are. The fog in the room makes it where these details in the background are not important, and then they hit the face in such a way that I get the good shaping and that rim light that kind of lights each of these characters. Instantly, I know what I'm looking at. Here's a beautiful shot from Pride and Prejudice. Why is this beautiful? Because there's good depth. There's a good framing to this. The lighting is very easy to understand, and the characters are backlit. This idea of backlighting is a powerful thing. So the light kind of comes from behind like a rim light, and so it just separates the character so easily from the background, and there's enough haze in the air from the background that I can read this instantly. So backlighting is a powerful tool to be able to make separation. And it's very interesting. It's so used that we can break the idea of continuity. Continuity means from shot to shot that they feel like they're in the same world. So I would like to look at where lighting can break continuity and where it doesn't. And this is something that junior lighting artists that come in, takes a while to like, when can you break the rules and when should you not break the rules? And I'll make it really easy with this. Here's a shot from Lord of the Rings, the first of the movies, Fellowship of the Ring, where Frodo, the main character, is running from this character on the horse. One of the Dark Riders is chasing him. And so the cinematographer put this giant light up on a big stand to make it look like moonlight, even though it's way brighter than any moon would be. It looks like moonlight that we would see with our eyes if our eyes had adjusted. And it makes this beautiful shape, and it has this mood to it. But when the camera cuts to see Frodo's perspective of where he's running, you would think, for continuity, the characters that he's running to, they should be front lit by the light. But when you cut to the next shot, they're not front lit. The moon moved 180 degrees with them, around them, to also backlight them. So this whole sequence, almost every shot, the lighting is moving with them. So where's your continuity? Why do this? And the reason to do this is because the mood is the most important thing, and the position of the lights doesn't matter so much. People will forgive it as long as you go, oh, it feels like it's in the same, this feels like it's in the same sequence. The colors are right, the lighting is right, the contrast is right. I don't care where the moon is. The moon will move from shot to shot. Watch this when you're watching movies or watching, TV shows. Look at how much, slow down and actually look at it and say, how much is the light actually moving around? Here's an example from the movie Hugo that does the exact same thing. Conversation between two characters. They're both backlit. So every time the camera moves, the lights move with them. And it's because the cinematographer wanted them to have good separation, good, popping off the background and being able to see them, and also wanted the light on the characters' faces to always be soft. So it's always bounce light, soft light that's onto the characters, not direct, harsh sunlight. I was working on the TV show Westworld and doing some research ahead of time before we got to set to do our part. I was doing virtual production on a big LED wall for the final season of Westworld. And I had observed that all the lighting is almost always backlit. And, I talked with the director of photography, and then I also talked with Jonathan Nolan about this, and he said to me, he doesn't just prefer backlighting, he will always backlight his scenes. He just likes the look, that separation, the soft light onto the characters' faces. It's very rare in a Jonathan Nolan film or TV show to have direct sunlight coming right onto the face. So he was like, I always do backlighting. Enough so that I heard about this sequence on, the opening season of Westworld, where a character comes in, and the way they shot this scene, looking one way, looking another, they got up early in the morning to shoot the scenes looking this direction. And then they finished their day, shot other shots, and then came back in the evening when the sun had moved around to the other side so they could shoot the reverse shots in order to make that continuity look like it was always beautifully backlit in this magical, mystical world. The next one here is contrast. Our eye is naturally drawn to the brightest pixels against the darkest pixels. When we see high contrast, we look at it. So in a scene like this, there's highest contrast here, so I'm going to look there first. Secondary, I'm going to look at these characters because there's also contrast on them. And everything else in the frame has low contrast, so I don't even look there. I don't look at the pipes up in the top in this spiral staircase. I have to like really look to it because there's no contrast there. So I want to present the idea of light on dark, dark on light. This is also called a checkerboard effect. And this is when you put a light part onto a dark background and a dark part onto a light background, and it just makes it easy on the eyes. Let's look at these examples. So these first two images are from Batman Begins. Great example, of the light part of his face is on a dark background. The dark part of his head is on a light background. This is done very intentionally in every single shot to help give separation of the characters. And we talk about this as we're lighting films and making sure like you'll set up a set of lights and then for this shot, let's move that light, let's move this light, let's add some dark over here. Let's give this checkerboard light on light or light on dark, dark on light effect. Here on a shot where you've got a character dressed in black at night, you're not going to be able to see them. So they position the camera in such a way that they have the lights of this building to be able to separate his head from the background. Look at more examples of this character all in dark is in front of a light background, so I can see the shape, I can see the form of this character. And then, this character here is light on dark, dark on light, light on dark, dark on light, dark on light. I can see that contrast. There's also color contrast, and this is the difference of, being able to, your eye will look for differences in color. So in this scene from John Wick, they lit all of these other characters that are not important with green light, but the one we should look at has warm light. And so besides the focus of this shot, you can really see this is the character that I should be looking at. This scene from Blade Runner, it would be pretty flatly lit if it weren't for that change in color, because the warm rim lights and this kind of cool front fill, there's a difference there. So I can see the shaping because of that color contrast. Talking about color, that's the next one, palette. So palette to me is something very interesting. If we go and you study a lot of images, by the way, there's this awesome website called ShotDeck, and I'm not getting paid to promote them. I love ShotDeck because you can come in here and you can look at hundreds of thousands of images from hundreds of different films to really do these studies to go, what is the light? And so if as I look through these, I notice the limited palettes. I was talking with a good friend of mine and he was noticing this too, that there really is this limited amount of colors in the light. They light this in such a way that it's very easy on the eyes and you just see there's like green and warm and that's it. Or you can look at a scene like this and the characters are very easy to see and I don't pay attention to anything else but the characters. So I'm right there because all the other light is just this almost monochromatic. Look at this image here that has this very cold color and a warm color. That's it. Just kind of like a two color. It's a full color image, but the lighting is done in such a way to simplify things. If this was all flatly lit and there was bright red in the background and there'd just be too much there to look at it, it would be more confusing. Some of these shots too, and like, wow, it's just one color all the way across. Blade Runner in particular is very heavy on this. It was just like very simple graphic images due to simplified color palettes in shots. And yet, I'd like to bring up the idea of color complexity. This is mainly for the illustrators in the room to understand if you're going to have to you're going to have to hand paint all of this. You don't just do one color. My other video on color temperature, let's look at the color temperature in this. Even though the lighting is very simple, there's only a couple of light sources. There's not a whole bunch of like rim lights in this character. We can still see the idea of color temperature. So at the core of this light, it's white, and then it goes to a desaturated kind of like cyan color. And then as it gets farther away, as it loses its intensity of temperature, it shifts into more blues and it gets more saturated. Anyhow, I like the idea of complex color complexity on very simple lighting. You can see this on all the light sources and the way the light color wraps if you really study it. Learning to see like an artist is key. Being able to come in and know what makes something beautiful because you know what light does and what is beautiful. Okay, I'm gonna geek out, and I'm gonna show something that I noticed too, that lighting artists sometimes talk about, but a lot of people won't notice, and this is color contamination. Fog in a scene, atmospheric perspective, it's easy to go, okay, the farther away something is, the more the fog affects it. But there's more. So like in games, you can have what they call Z depth fog. So you've got an x-axis and a y-axis of the screen, and then there's Z, which goes into space. You know, like back here is Z depth compared to, you know, what's up close to the camera. So instead of just putting a color over top and just saying one color, you know, that it just adds into the background, what happens in the real world is there is light that bounces, and then it gets this color contamination. So look at this image from one of the Harry Potter movies. I can't remember which one, sorry. I just saw this image and thought it was really cool, of Hogwarts. The fog up here, the fog tone up here versus down in here, there's blues from the mist in the air, but then there's also these warm colors, this contamination of the light that bounces off of the warm stones and the warm colors and then mixes into the air and just kind of like softens everything together. Even the focus, you know, of the edges of these buildings, if you really pay attention to the small details here, it starts to just kind of contaminate and blur, and it's just that subtle beauty, that subtlety that makes the beauty even more believable and even more compelling. Shot-based versus sequence-based lighting. So this is, I did a study a while back of two different films, actually several different films. I always do this. I take screen captures and I study the films. This is the film Hugo, and this is the film Klaus. Hugo has this idea that almost through the whole film, every shot is a composition that has the ideas, you know, the whole film itself is this warm versus cool. So almost every shot has cold blue lights and warm, you know, kind of other lights in this, and every shot, you know, you can see this warm lights, cool lights, warm lights, cool lights. It has this contrast. And so if I take all of the 300 images that I took from this film, smash them all together into a line like this and blur my eyes, it's kind of this gray. I can see little bits of blue here and there. It's because every shot has all of the color in every shot. Versus the movie Klaus has a color per sequence. And so in this shot, it's mostly this, you know, kind of muddy green. And then the next shot, it's this very cool snow color. And then there's this very cyan sequence and a very bright blue sequence. And if I smash all the images that I captured off of this, I can actually see this kind of flow through sequences. It is thinking of sequence-based lighting. Oh, I'm so excited to share more of this with you all. This is just kind of scratching the surface, but this is what gets exciting about lighting films and being a cinematographer, is thinking about the way the light goes with the mood in the story through an entire film, not just in a shot. Like, you first need to understand how to make light believable, then you need to how to make it beautiful, and then you need to how can you tell the story through multiple sequences. And this was something that I really loved when working on The Incredibles. The lighting was made and designed in such a way to support the story of Bob Parr, Mr. Incredible, and the beginning of the film it's oversaturated because it's his. From his standpoint, this was an idyllic past where the colors are super bright. You know, the nights are super blue and the days are, you know, just the color is super strong. And then when he loses his ability to be a superhero, all of the color is washed out of the film. And then through the film, as he gets back into his superhero work, slowly color is added back in until you reach the end sequence where it's kind of like this balance, where it's not too saturated, but it's also not too monochromatic, because he has learned the lesson of balancing his family life and his work life together into one where he has his family be together. You know, that's what the story is. It's kind of like a midlife crisis story, really. This, by the way, is a color script from the movie. And a color script is one image that shows the entire film in the flow of color through the sequences. Versus color keys, well, I'm going to talk about this more in other videos upcoming about how to do cinematography and lights for film. So let me just look again. Early sequence, too saturated, cut to present day, and it's just monochromatic. Another film that I like to look at color palettes is The Matrix. Every time you're in The Matrix, there's this green cast to everything, and every time you're outside of The Matrix, it has a cool cast. It's a subtle way where the lighting and the coloring can support the storytelling and that contrast of using the palette. The last one I want to talk about is what I call the dance. And this is that flow through sequences, and I'm going to just look at two different sequences from two different films and just to study this idea of the dance. I thought about music. Some people have replied on this channel of how the concepts of simplifying apply outside of just art. They apply to music. I totally agree. I think about music. I'm a musician as well, and I like to play keyboards and guitars and drums and different things. And I think it's fun. And I can see this flow where you like this kind of build up, you reach to a chorus and the music changes, and then you come back to verses and bridges, and it's just kind of like this. It's a dance. You have, some slow parts and some fast parts, and it's just really amazing to me. Anyhow, this is from Mission Impossible Fallout, and there is a sequence where these two characters are hunting someone. And they go through, it's this quiet sequence, and they come through this club, and there's all kinds of flashing lights, and it's this big dance as they're looking for people. When they find them, the light completely changes, and they have this scene in this bathroom that is just very monochromatic. It's just everything is white. And then when they're done in here, they go back out into the chaos. And it's just a very interesting way to do the sequences. They have a fight sequence that happens during this, in this monochromatic area. And you would think usually, high action sequences would be done where all the flashy lights are, but they kind of flipped it on its head. Also, let's look at this, the scene from John Wick, where this character has lost his wife and his dog, and it's very sad, and he, is trying to find information. And so it flows from this one sequence of a funeral and then into a sequence in a completely different location inside of a car shop. But the color palette flows through because you're in the mind and the feeling of this character. No one would light a car shop with all blue lights like this. This is not believable. They would have white lights and you would see all the colors of the car. So again, photorealistic, photoreal should mean that this looks like a car shop, so light it like a car shop. But no, they're going to grade this and they're going to light this in such a way that it follows that palette and the flow of the mood of the characters. All right, and then the last tool here, I know this is a really long video, so thanks for sticking with me, is focal point. What are we looking at? What is the most important thing? And sometimes cinematography can be done in a way that it's almost ridiculous how much you can't look anywhere else. Where's the contrast? Where's the shaping? Where, what is the depth? Boom, I should look right there. I almost can't look at anything else because this is out of focus and there's no light here. I'm looking at this character's eyes. So using this as what is the point of your illustration, of your lighting image? Is there something to look at? Point that thing out. This shot from Klaus, again, I know where to look because there's contrast here. There's even lines that support this idea of like everything points to look at that character. I'm going to look at this part of the screen. Very few people are going to notice the laundry hanging on this rope. This is not going into a museum and looking at a painting that was done 200 years ago and being able to have time to really study all of these things. If this shot is only 3 seconds long, I need to know where to look. So the cinematography says, look here. It's this character, this small character coming into this big world that feels overwhelming to him. Another example from Arcane. The lighting and the composition completely supports. I know exactly where to look. I'm not going to look at anything else around here because all of the color and all of the contrast is right there in the center. It's very, very obvious. Another image, this one, I like these type of ideas of kind of two composition. So I'm going to look where the light is, the most intense. I'm going to look here, but I can't see the character. So then I'm going to look over here where the next level of contrast is and be like, okay, it's about this character, but this character is looking over here. So now I've got two things to look at that are supporting that storytelling. Okay, so here's one. I was working on a game, Uncharted Lost Legacy. We had a sequence where this character was coming to find this lost city. And we were like, we want it to be beautiful. We want it to be understandable, but we also want to say, where do I need to go? This is a video game, so I need to see the shape. I need to understand what it is, but I also need to be like, go here. This is one of the common things in game lighting is like, it needs to be very obvious where I need to go. So there's a beam of light that says, go here. This is exactly where I need to go. And then I can see there's this other city back here, and I used fog to kind of layer this back in to understand all the shapes and the depth and how big this is, and not draw attention to where I don't need to go. Definitely say, the highest contrast, the brightest parts are right here, and then I can see my character off to the side. The last little thing here is talking about focus, depth of field. Of course, it's very obvious of like, what am I going to look at in a frame? So I know I'm paying attention to this character. I'm not paying attention to the character back here because they're out of focus, so I don't need to see that. Look at some of these other images. This one's really amazing where it's there's just one point of focus here where I can look at this character's eyes, and everything else, it just makes it for a really beautiful composition. I don't need to look over here, even though there's light over here. I don't need to look over here. I only have one place I can look. Here's another image from the movie Drive, where it doesn't matter what's down the street. I don't need to know about street signs, and I don't need to know about anything. I'm in the mind of this character, and the only point that's in focus is right there, is their eyes. So it just makes a beautiful composition that gives me a focal point. What am I looking at? What is beauty now? Is it some ethereal thing that can't be touched? I think that there is a science to this. There is a commonality of language, of visual language that we as a culture understand, maybe not in our conscious minds, but in our subconscious minds for sure. When we watch movies, these tools are used so much that you know instinctively where to look, how to think, what the mood is. All of these things subconsciously support strong storytelling. The best compliment to a lighting artist is that people didn't pay attention to it and that they were moved by the emotion of it. They just see the story of what is being told. That's the most important thing. And that's what we want to do. We want to make images that are so believable and so fantastic that they just overwhelm us with the beauty. When people just say, oh, it's such a beautiful image. But we know as lighting artists why. And we know as artists all these secret tools that we have that we can use. Tools at our disposal to make things very easy on the eyes, very easy to understand, and we can just make beautiful things. All right, well, thank you for taking the time for watching this. For those of you who stuck through all to the end, thank you again, and I hope that this was useful, and I look forward to more videos soon. Talk to you later. Bye.